Sanje Shindo Mede Po
Nam Dakshin Shogi Dang Guru Ratnamanda Kani
Oh yeah, that must do good. Oh yeah, that didn't you good. Tena kowa la chowa tu, teni dunga dan, dunga jiranshi la mateba la tu bene, lam koma na la, tu ma shuo zamji ngeshi yuena asa, ta lam koma na la, des nyamnyong yunga zi, des namju kumzi yuena. Labrin chenju dan, zanru ni so ne, zanru ki zhigji ni so ne, teda ki zhe chabi, ane kowa dunlu, dawa la kowa dunlu dan, minam chazu, Luriji Tachaba Sumba Nam da never cock to in bass. No cock to in bear. Da Kondu Sheba Lavin Tedala and Jamba Yobada. Majamba Tamjaji, Shundun Gombi, Guno Namdaki, and Tesam and Dezawures.
So thus, to continue from where we ended earlier today, so it says that not being confused about the activities that are found in the higher portions of the path, if one has a definite ascertainment of that, in order to get that, this is on page 205 of the sub-commentary in the middle, one will give rise to a good understanding of the way in which all of these things are contextually related to each other, as they're explained in the greater and lesser stages of the path, in the great commentaries on the Mula Madhyamaka Karikas, the root verses on Madhyamaka, as well as the Madhyamaka Avatar, the introduction to the middle way. Those one will gain that, and likewise the way in which the object that one is to experience in this meditation arises. These are the way that works is taught such that one is able to definitively ascertain that by means of scriptural references and reasoning. Since this is something that is absolutely indispensable within this particular context here, in the context of developing meditation on Mahamudra, then those who have previously studied these things, and those as well as those who have not previously studied these things, should make every kind of effort that they can to understand them with the proper kind of motivation for developing the meditations that are the meaning of these great texts.
Oh yeah. Kuno namda ki thesam nanden zana as mixun dam jilumbo waza jebe tamgom dam medrawas mixum vege ane milumbo waza jebe ane tamdam gomdam medrabe jawa jibi chujun du trawa la jawa jibi chujun trawa la tuza du ane tudan za delu xiandam medrawa jungwe labes deni 인상 중의 인배 다들 rinji 링도 탄조 렌직 조 탄조의 땡지 땡상 렌직 토밤 다 렌직 조와 되라 rinji 링도 렌직 조와 되라 세디 왕도 송이 전로당 아니 토리 담지에서 원도 3미 점 토비 치도 아니 배소체와 된중당 대한마이 봐 대만인자 시대 잠지 된 멤버다 만들어와 라니 지부 시대 전적 된 멤버다 만들어와 의주 자선 양답에 따와 숨지지 관에 안에 남도 명하와 조den치비 이제 왕그 남도 명하와 안에 조위 된체비 이제 왕그 겨 뉴도 렘바시 지내제 자고 다디 어도 순샤가로지
So then this, if one makes that kind of effort for listening to these sorts of instructions and thinking about them with every kind of exertion that one can develop, then one will be able to achieve a great accomplishment, which is quite different from the kind of meditation that that one will be able to gain an understanding of these practices, which is quite different from the sort of stories about meditation which merely amaze those who are stupid by means of people sort of blinking their eyes, that kind of meditation practice. So it's quite different from that. And this will give one an ability to achieve the one will, if one does that properly, then one will definitely be able to give rise to a kind of capacity and skill to be able to produce all of the incredible activities, the sort of amazing worship practices and the clouds of worship that delight all of the victors together with the bodhisattvas, the Buddhas and bodhisattvas. One will be able to give rise to all of that. And that being the case, then right now we've arrived at an island which is filled with precious treasures. This is referring to the kind of life that we've achieved at this moment, which is endowed with the freedom to practice and all of the prerequisites for practice, this moment of opportunity. Therefore, we should turn away from wasting our time on the activities that are only going to produce some kind of trivial results in this life. And likewise, we should not be concerned with the insignificant kind of results of being reborn in heaven, that kind of thing. And then likewise not be mixed up with sort of inferior kind of aspiration or inferior kind of goal of one's own peace and happiness, like achieving just one's own liberation. Without that, then one should have conjoined together, combined into a single integrated unit, renunciation, bodhicitta, and the right view. And then if one does that, then once one has done that, then one should do whatever one can to quickly arrive at the status of the mighty king who is able to, the precious mighty king who is able to accomplish all of the aims of living beings without any kind of, the Buddhas are able to do that without even thinking about it.
Oh yeah, that didn't match that. Kasura, Tani Shunde, Surabji, that's a good thing, but Namyong number 2, Katsawa, the Dunasta, Tangan the Carreras, Namder Zawak, Shundi. That dig Kasura, Emotive Rebak Sungari, Labrin Chijin to the Mart, the town I had. Kashi don't tell any, Masheta to Sambachus. Kasure, Simbe de la Sécurité, Sibé Junam Jebachi, Yunden Tome Yon Seba, Maishi to Jilin, Terandala Monchaba, Tessitin Koa Churu, Seo Dadi, Namrita vaccine. That Daton say Dadi and Dadi, Josa did and Dadi, and the Ranja to be Zeg to Truvalet Ma, Zing Jaguar, Tanamriki, Jigdagi. Namri Kasu Jigda de Carreras and Maranja to be said to us in between body. That Tanjuala Tanata Rashin to us in what 10 major Ranji, Rande Ranji, but Majaki, and then dancing La Jigda La Raja to be said to us in that D. Kakase or Madu Shungi Tendu, the Gacha de Mato, Jisu deep and Missiva Yabo Yasunga. Yeah.
So thus now then if one explains this in accordance with the way it has been elucidated by those who have experience from this, and which is tied together with the special ways that this is indicated in the scriptures in accordance with the meaning of the great texts. Then we can do this by a passage from the Compendium of Valid Cognition. These are the verses that follow are the Pramana Vartika, the Compendium of Valid Knowledge. And here, the definition of the object of negation is actually in the Pramana Vartika itself is different, because in the that text is expressing the view of a view that's common to the Sautrantika and the Yogacara schools. So in that, and one can also include the Swatantrikas in that their view of the object of negation, which ties one into samsara, is the misapprehension of the self as if it was a self-sufficient substance. But we can change that if we modify that and interpret this in terms of the prasangika view, which is that a self which exists by means of its own intrinsic nature. Then the rest of the explanation of the way in which samsara operates is completely acceptable and right on the mark. So these verses then say that when someone sees the self, here, and this is referring to the self which is misapprehended, then they always become attached to an I. And out of that attachment to an I, they crave for pleasure or happiness. And out of that craving, because of that craving, that craving itself obscures the faults. And instead of seeing the faults, one sees what is actually faulty as having good qualities, and one becomes completely attached to that. And so then, in order then such a person takes as the means to achieve that pleasure that they're seeking, that which is mine. And then out of that, they become even more excessively attached to the self. And for as long as they have that attachment to that excessive attachment to the self, then they are in samsara.
Oh yeah, I can't say na. Kanshi dadon tela ni ngashi dadu semba juru serigana. Ane thoma tela ane da thone sega ane nga shebage ane kasore ngara jo nga se nga da sede ane ngala mina ane ngara shinji chuwa zimbi zimba ta tanju yura jayikan dadon tela tam kanshi dadon tela ni isere thoma da nga rashinji chuwa zibi zimba zeche wa tambo uma chibi kasal tambo nga shedala shenju chik se de chiba leang ko thoma ane da rashinji chuwa zibi zimba ze deni ane dagi lonjaja jibi ane dagiwa la dagiwa zimbi ki yeah.
So if we gloss this, take it in the way prasangikas would read this, then first of all, we see the self or the I, and we seeing that I, then we misapprehend it as if it existed intrinsically, as if it had its own intrinsic existence. And so we see the I or the self and misapprehend it as if it possessed intrinsic existence. And then out of that, this is just as is said in the introduction to the Middle Way, where Chandrakirti says that first we misapprehend the I, and then we misapprehend that which belongs to the I, or that which is mine. or one can replace that with self as well. The two are interchangeable in this context, I or self. So here then it says that likewise, once we've misapprehended the I, thinking it's intrinsically existent, then we misapprehend that which is the possession of the I, that which is mine, as if it was intrinsically existent as well.
Oh yeah. 아니 다다 민자와 되바기 세바기. 다다 민자와 되 다다 민자와 되비 세바기. 걔네 아니 다기 대화 전역이 세바기니. 그러나 다기 대화 전역 완전히 가소래. 완소 다다 와당 다기 대화 전역이 길어지니 된 아니 완소 안보당 술라서와 다다 와당 아니 치료지 세골라서와기 아니 세바기에 두서 담보 다기 대화라 전역이 세바기. 되는 다기 대화데 아니 대라도 순도가 판두거바 통해서 완소 다다 와당 안보라서와 다다 와당 아니 치료디 세당 괴라 소와라 아니 세바기바 이러와 달라 대바데 판두거바 통해 두제 다기 와라 세바기 세데 완소 다다 와당 아니 치료지 세외라 소와라 세바기 야 완소 다다 미그 안보라 소와 다다 와라.
So then first one sees the self, and then one misapprehends it or grasps at it in the wrong way. Then out of that, then one gives rise to a kind of craving which wishes to not be separated from self, from I. And then when that itself gives rise to the craving which seeks for the pleasure of the self's pleasure. So then out of that, then one realizes that in order to accomplish pleasure for the self, happiness for the self, then one engages in attachment. One gives rise to more attachment for that which belongs to the self. So this here regarding what belongs to the self or what is mine. Mine could refer to the components of the self which are part of the person, like the sense faculties and so forth, which are the media through which we experience pleasure. And then, or it could be possessions, things like food and clothing and so forth. So based on the first misapprehension of the self, then misapprehending that which is mine, then we give rise to that kind of craving for I, mine, the things which give pleasure to I or me.
Oh yeah, then it dark the one ruby to shube and castle. Debe turn Drubana, the Jatang. Debe turn Madruna, and a castle, debe turn only Madruna Shetang, Shetan, and the Chatang Tiwagi, and the Chatan.
So then out of that, when we're striving to accomplish our pleasure, our happiness, then out of all of this misapprehension, then when we do achieve some kind of pleasure, then we give rise to attachment to it. Then, on the other hand, when we are frustrated in accomplishing our pleasure or happiness, then we get angry. So we have a attachment to that which pleases us, and an anger toward frustration and anger towards that which is displeasing, or which when the achievement of our pleasure is frustrated.
Debe turn Drubala, Chabadang, debe turn Madrubala, and the Chatan Chatan Teta Wangi, Aneta Lesa.
So then out of that, so when we achieve our pleasure, our happiness, out of this confused attachment, and we accomplish it, then that gives rise to more attachment, more craving and desire. When we don't accomplish our aims, then and we get unhappy about that, then we get angry. So both of those, attachment and anger, arise out of this.
어제 다들이 레디 바자 아니 남식이 띵도 마 거니 아니 남식이 띵도 그 남식이 띵도 그와데 아니 셀레니치 셋다니 아니 세바다 렘바 아니 셋다 레진누바 셋다발라 때네 아니 세비단데 주비가서 아니 레진누바 투젠도 줄 되네 야스치만 인점 좋아나 아니 제비단데 주고여당 어디다 되다 주고와 토메 주지기다 그와라 스벌제네 레사 레지왕의 코를 깨와 이룰어서 레베 탐제지 공부지다 진식
So then, this when we're doing this, that is, we're striving to accomplish our happiness, and we achieve it out of this misapprehension of everything involved. Then we give rise to strong attachment. That activity that we're engaged in, which is dominated by that kind of attachment, or the contrary of it, when we become frustrated and angry at not accomplishing our happiness or pleasure, then that kind of activity as well infuses our stream of consciousness with an imprint, which is the after effect of the karma, the action itself. And then that imprint or functioning like a seed is carried over into subsequent lives, and then when that, or at the end of the present life, if that imprint or seed is then activated by craving and grasping again, then that manifests or produces a result, which is becoming conceived into or taking rebirth into the next life. And then so from that, the entire process of samsara is perpetuated. And so the way in which karma causes us to be reborn within samsara in this process as described, that is taught by Master Nagarjuna together with his spiritual disciples and all of the other great masters. They have the same exact opinion on this, and they express it in the same exact terms.
Oh yeah, then 다 가서래 양세천만 인점 자와당. then 다 신이 기위 된데라 전 주소와 주와당 아니 다 가위 된데다 스바탄이 깨와다 가시탄이 양한다 명아되자 투바당. 이미다다 추바나 대다jel라로도 중 전에 어수원아 지간에 되다 제가 나지 동안에서 강가가 중요해 안에다 깨워라 때문에 중요해 또 수면 말이.
So thus then once one has taken rebirth, then the rest of the process, the chain of dependent origination flows out of that, so that as soon as one takes rebirth, then aging starts, then sickness arises, death comes from that. All of the various forms of suffering that are experienced within the process of samsara all arise out of that initial taking of rebirth under the power of karma. That karma has started the process, and then once the result of that karma arises, then one takes birth, and the entire process, the continued chain of events of being aging, sickness, and death, and other forms of suffering that occur within samsaric existence arise all out of that. And this is explained likewise where Master Nagarjuna has shown that all of these components of dependent origination are linked together such that once it's started, all of the other factors of dependent origination are meshed together with it, so that the process is perpetuated without any end until one puts an end to it.
Oh yeah. 다 된사 다 가서는 내가 그 자와데 아니 토미 단전데 니근테 자와데 토미 단전체 토미 단전데 수 마숑바라 아니 남신 강거장 아니 코알라 토미니바 이자 뭐죠 어 토미 단전 세와데다 코알 토미 단전 세와로 코알라 토마이베 마치바체 로 동아 계지기 주의 자 코알 계지기 주의 자와라 코알도 토마이와 말데 토미 단전 세와로 코알 계지기 주의 자와데라 고고에 말이.
So then the root of samsara, again, is this initial ignorance, the initial misapprehension of the self, that particular form of ignorance. That's, again, what causes us to engage in activity, contaminated forms of activity, which then give rise to birth, aging, sickness, and death, and so forth. So the initial point of the entire chain of dependent origination is the initial misapprehension of the self. Now, where it says initial here, now samsara as such is beginningless. There's no initial point of it or beginning of it, but in terms of the causality of dependent origination, it's specified as being the initial link in the 12 links or factors of dependent origination, because this connate ignorance is the beginning part of the process of dependent origination.
Oh yeah. 가서리 뒤단계를 중원나 야다반에 또바가 전이 덤배 마리송 텔라 야라 중이 중 세가나 인자 마리바라 때네 뒤지를 때네 되다 남시체 마 용거와 이상 야라 중이지 토미 아니 토미 마리바데 다 토미 마리바데 행제지 마리바스 토미 행제지 마리바스 토미 행제 세반에 아니 춥달라 장 맞아 탐제라 아니 예박이
Here, so then this is saying that, again, this connate or natural ignorance is the beginning of the entire chain of events within dependent origination of samsara, in that from that ignorance, having that ignorance, one engages in activity, which is karma, and then the karma produces all of the effects that come out subsequently. So here where it says it can be called connate ignorance or natural ignorance, that means that it's given that specified in that term because this is found within those who have studied philosophy as well as those who have not studied philosophy. It exists within beings that have not yet. It doesn't require some kind of philosophical. The ignorance operates within beings that are whether or not they have trained in philosophy.
Oh yeah. 다들이 텐더에 말을 받지 아니 수인진 봐서야지 말을 봐 수인진 봐서 그 강한 전지게 다데 말을 봐 코란 매봤어 많이 받지 말을 봐 수인진 세야지 말을 봐 유수인 중앙에서 말을 봐기 강한 전지게 다 말아 뒤가라이나 던주가라이나 말아 신지 좋아 어 수인 말아 신지 집에 수인진 된양 그下切와 생은진지 주원 나라신도 주위 전바티가 강 전범下切와디 나라신지 주와티체 오라신지 주와 매바티 그 전당고 요라신지 주바 매바 시와라 아니 안진 나한테 현유 순수하면 순수의 텐테레스
순수의 된
순수 당진 그 현유 순수화
순수화 아신 그랑 순수화 So now then, with respect to the eradication of this ignorance, here, this natural or connate ignorance, here, the meaning of that is that what it has to do with is showing that the object which is apprehended by that is non-existent. It's not, at this point, talking about the eradication of that ignorance as such. Rather, it's the eradication here is, or refutation of the ignorance is showing that the object that is supposedly apprehended by that ignorance is in fact completely non-existent. So here, if we interpret this in terms of the Prasangika school, the object of this natural or innate ignorance is the misapprehension or the notion that the self exists intrinsically, has some kind of intrinsic nature or intrinsic existence. So that what that is saying is that so it's the refutation of this or eradication of it is by showing that it is understanding that it doesn't exist in the way that that ignorance apprehends it or content. The text is here literally saying that the text is literally saying that that ignorance contends that that its object exists, that is, that an intrinsically existing self, whereas it doesn't.
Oh yeah. 아니 다 가서 매바 시화 대양 아니 매년바 대박이 아니 미용와 다 유매 째째네 매바 다 쪼고래 세르가 아니 나听기 세유랑 신지 주와데 단정지 세유랑 신지 주와데 아니 다 다시 풍비지 강사주 도베 시 아니 풍비딩도 잡아쳐와나 나랑 신지 주와데 아니 다시 풍부 소수 다시 풍비딩도 잡아잖아 아니 레레레레 그때는 매뚝뚝뚝담 초비딩도 두담 다 째째니 아니 다 가서 다시 풍도 다시 딩도 아니 자완 매봐 타쳐봐나 타쳐봐나 다 배나 디스데레 대송도 한 풍비도 매봐 타쳐봐 배나 랑게 내가 민바 스빈다도 나군기 민바 카베나도 아니 디바라젠지 토메 냠추나 아니 냠추는 지바나 마데와 매냠 대바기 아니 디바라젠도 지바제 도투고 말레스 아니 매 드메 바네 로 because 드메 바네 아니 미단에 때베 메다 쳐바나 아니 티 지바 코제 자와나 도바단 자와 어디 신전이 아니 단정기 신유랑 신지 추바디 풍보당, 직당, 타대당, 다도서 막 대유가나, 가소리 부모가 소비din도, 풍비 입기din도, 풍보레레비din도, 강도 여바 대위나, 아니 강기din도야 매바 타제반이나, 다들이 라신지 주바디 쇼무두나, 아니다 라신지 주바 그바레스.
So then the way this works is that simply saying it doesn't exist. If you think it doesn't exist, and you're just laying about thinking it doesn't exist, it won't happen. That's not how we can get rid of this misapprehension of the self. The misapprehension of the self it has the object that appears to it, or what appears to it is a kind of existence that the self or the I doesn't actually possess. So simply laying about thinking that doesn't exist, it will not do anything to eradicate that innate or sort of what's born together with this natural sense of that it does exist. Rather, one has to investigate this and examine whether or not it exists thoroughly. That is, we have to determine exactly how it would exist if it did exist, and determine exactly how it doesn't exist. And that's the only way. Without doing that, there's no way that we can actually ascertain this. So we have to actually precisely ascertain that it does not exist. So an example to illustrate this is that if in your house, in your room, it's in a dark evening, the dusk has fallen and it's dark, and you've seen a scorpion roaming about in your room, and you're terrified of that scorpion. You've had that experience of seeing the scorpion. You're not going to, without looking for it, just laying about and saying, oh, it doesn't exist, is not going to benefit you in any way. You're not going to get any great benefit from that. Rather, you need to light a lamp, and then with your eyes sort of wide open, look around the room to make sure that the scorpion has left the room. And once you've determined that the scorpion is actually gone, then all of that fear that you experienced previously will go away. But to simply lay around thinking it doesn't exist is not going to dispel the fear that you're experiencing from having actually seen the scorpion. So just like that, this getting rid of the root of samsara, getting rid of that fear that you have based upon having actually seen the scorpion is similar here to what one has to do in order to get rid of the misapprehension of the self. So what we have to do is examine how the self would exist if it did exist in the way that it appears to us. First, we have to ascertain how it does appear. It appears naturally to us, although falsely to us, falsely and naturally appears to us as if it was intrinsically existent. So if there was such an intrinsically existing self, it would have to have some kind of relationship with the aggregates that it is based upon. That is, the self or the I. It only exists as is designated upon its basis of designation, the aggregates. So what we need to do then is to examine the basis of designation, the aggregates, and look for the self, see if that intrinsically existent self that we naturally and erroneously apprehend exists within the aggregates. So we look at the aggregates individually, the body and all the different parts of the mind, or we look at the aggregates collectively. We look at the configuration of the aggregates, and in all the different ways that the putatively, intrinsically existent self could possibly exist in relationship to the aggregates, its basis of designation. We examine whether or not such a self does exist within that basis of designation.
Oh yeah, then inda dini kasoro tadangaran zola nawaki daati. Ani yena timbari jang se kala da oh kan nawa dachi da yu nawa de kasan ranjala nawa ki da yu ranjala nawa dachi da me cheni ani sungye dri yo are de ngaran zola nawi ani da tela ranjan ji tu nang ju ma to ba ki ani o da nang ju ji zan me wa yin zang ani di sunggo are是吧 no 타다랑라 나비 다여나 아니 다디 dimba리 자서 란전지 주바 주자래야 대다 매바인스 다 매바인데 란전지 주바디 dimba리 밤 대다 매바인 대나 나와 란전디 때메도네 다 나와 란전스나 가르질레 송어레스나 란전스게디 타녀 따위 따뜻 따위 있잖아 예바대다 란전스고 말이 是吧？大西的定度，他就希望那些这里看啥个大西碰壁定度，安尼看啥咋对咋呢？安尼大西定度咋完呢？没对咋吧？大西对你原来念过来的，没话印象，哎，没念过的话，他念了，安尼他让先是让咱去出发的，现在让咱天南那话让咱点没度内为让咱点没度内为严啦，安尼他通嘛。 ranji badang ranji biri gachar me deba 단주비 가자 되어기 안에 랑장 그 주산데 안에 시고래 송과 대신나 안에 단주비로지 가자 주 안에 그발라 안에 제바 요한자
So thus, we have to ask ourselves: this self that is appearing to us, we right now, does it exist? How does it exist? If it did exist as it appears to us, then it would be correct to apprehend it as existing in that way. But in fact, it doesn't exist that way, like this. So what this is saying then is that the self as it appears to us, or the I as it appears to us, is always appears in an erroneous fashion. That is, it always appears as if it possessed intrinsic existence or intrinsic identity. Yet, those of us, when we samsaric beings, there's no time at all when the I or the self does not appear to us as if it was intrinsically existent or existed by means of its own intrinsic identity. However, it never actually possesses that kind of intrinsic existence or intrinsic identity. So if there was a self, such as the self that is appearing to us, then it would be appropriate to hold it in the way that it appears, but it doesn't exist like that in any way whatsoever. Therefore, this intrinsic identity that is appearing to us is completely non-existent. So here what this is referring to is that intrinsic identity refers to an identity that would exist within the basis of designation and would have to be findable when sought. So the self or the I is designated based upon its basis of designation, the aggregates. And if the I or the self existed by means of intrinsic identity, then it would be findable when you search for it within its basis of designation, the aggregates. Or that applies to everything else too, that if something is intrinsically existent, then when you seek that identity within the basis of designation, you would have to find some kind of basis for that identity within the basis of designation itself. This point is explained differently within the Swatantrika and Prasangika schools. That is, the Swatantrikas would say that things do possess intrinsic identity conventionally. That is, when you search for a foundation for the identity of the thing, you have to be able to find something within its basis of designation. Otherwise, there's no way to establish identity in any way whatsoever. But the Prasangikas disagree on that, and they reject the idea that identity is intrinsic to the thing that is designated by an identity. So that's the key point that they differ on. But understanding the Swatantrika position on this is extremely helpful adjunct to being able to develop the Prasangika understanding and understand it as the Prasangikas do.
Oh yeah, then in the dark under the now I ran be chetam, chitana be chetam, ranjan the trubache. Ranjan Madrumna, then the you can't so church the John Michel Wajita, chitana be chetam, ranjan truba. Ranjan to be chetam jela, yit debana. Bena or dini or rangi chasha namdang, and then what tada to Nayang. What tada to Nayang. 아니 나주랑 오타다도 나야 아니 늘루랑 오치도 주봐 봐 나주다 내주 믿어 봐 나루랑 오타 사샤는도 오타다도 나나 늘루라 타다티 동비 나도 니주지 니도 주바지다 고고와리 나루랑 오타다도 나 늘루랑 오타다도 예나 아니 답변나 다다 풍부니 어디 나루랑 오타다도 나 다룬 아니 들려야 뭐 타다니요네 아니 다분이 되면 퇴시이 바타미 제가 이바이자 이자 뭐 타다라 되면 퇴시하고 이자 다다도 풍분히 오도 뭐 타다도 나루랑 뭐 타다도 나야 되율라 뭐 타다비 동바기 아니 뭐지 이자 나동 니조시가나 나루랑 뭐 타다나 대롱도 뭐 타다도 아니 타다베 동바게 나도 니조지 주마다 부샤다래 하고서 배나 주미 대신 배라 대고고고아래 주미 대신 달란도 나양 달란도 맞추봐 와 주미 대신 달란도 나양 주미 대신 달란도 맞추봐 주마 컴보와 되기 대신 달란도 나야 달란도 맞춰봐기 나도 니조데 또고아와 와 대나신 어느다 치다나 그뭐 간지지 이나양 알아 랑그 차샤난다 뭐 타대도 나양 나루랑 뭐 타대나 들루라 아니 뭐 타대비 동와키
둘
뭐 타대비 동와 동바
낭룰 뭐 타리베
나루 뭐 타대도 나와 들루 뭐 지도
okay this is hard so within the Swatantrika school their position is that if you take a thing and its basis of designation, so for example, we'll take the self and the aggregates as our point of departure here. The self and the aggregates, according to their way of explaining the relationship between the self as the identity for the self and the aggregates, then the self and the aggregates appear as if they have a different character. That appears to us as if the self and the aggregates had a different character. But in the actual way in which they exist, they don't have a different character. There's the self and the aggregates are of the same character. So the disparity between the way the self and the aggregates appear to us and the way in which they actually exist indicates that they don't exist in the way that they appear to us, and that disparity is the way in which the Swatantrikas established the combination of emptiness and appearance as being like a magical illusion. So within their school, within their way of explaining this, they would say that the self and when the self appears to us and the aggregates appear to us, they appear as if they had different characters. But when we actually investigate the nature of the self and the aggregates, and we determine what their actual character is, we can determine that in reality they have the same character. And so that fact of that same character between the self and the aggregates is again demonstrates that there's this disparity between the way they appear to us ordinarily, or people that are under the control of ignorance, and the way that they actually exist. And so that being the case, then that disparity enables the Swatantrikas to establish a combination of the appearance and emptiness as being like a magical illusion. So their way of explaining the example of magical illusions is that the magician does a kind of spell over the basis of the conjuring. When a magician is conjuring up a illusory elephant or horse or whatever, there's like a thing that they place some substance on. They recite a special mantra, etc. And by means of that, they're able to conjure up the image, the illusory image of the elephant or the horse. Now, according to the Swatantrikas, then it is the case that illusory horse or illusory elephant doesn't exist in the way that it appears, but nevertheless, we have to say that stick, let's say, that is the basis for the conjuring, is appearing as a illusory horse or an illusory elephant. So that's the way they explain that example.
Oh yeah. 나루랑 뭐 타대도 나야 누루랑 뭐 타대 동바기 동바 텐다데 다 루부지 차지 추지 말라비기 차지 추지 말라비 다 도바 참마당 도매 참마 주소라 그와 네메 생각이 들었어. 네메 생각이 간데 지렸어. 그래서 또바 참마다. 또메지 참마. 차지 주지 말래 배셔와지라. 아니 또바 또 네메 생각이. 예자 루부지 차지 주지 말래 배 네메라 왕게 샤바. 나면 샤비 준비되루데. 답변아 지난 거 오와나 란잔지 가서래 루네메라 나요 왕게 샤바 마이 바 란잔지 주바 나양 란잔주 마주바디. 와 마주바디 준비되루데 군도도 주바라 맹가양. 是吧 군도도 주바다 맹가양. 다들 가서 맹가양 레메라 왕게 샤바 마이 바 튼지 되루서 여바디 된주비나 시도 가와레스. 된주비나 안에 가와레스. 와 나주랑 뭐 태다도 나와이데 대바 추나 아니 뒤에 따도 대바 추고데 변종 뭐 태다도 뭐 지도 좀 묘묘 대바 좀나 따도 대바 연구 이거 이상 뭐 뒤에 따도 대바 뭐 태다 연구레스.
두 따도
대바 이나 그래 나주의 내주 믿음 바 이메용와 대바 이나 뒤에 따도 대바 연구레스.
So that being the case, that here they're saying that that combination of the two, the appearance and the emptiness here referring to the basis of designation and the thing which is designated being devoid of that kind of separate character that we falsely attribute to them. That makes it the case that these are simply like magical illusions. These two brought together, the appearance and the emptiness of it, are like a magical illusion, and that. So with respect to that, here then, this. So here then, that such an unreal way of things existing, which is that they would exist as if they were not posited simply by the force of appearing to an unvitiated cognition, which has not been adulterated or affected by an adventitious source of error. That sort of erroneous way of existing is not contradictory for something that's been merely established phenomenally. It's a mere phenomenal thing, but it's extremely contradictory for something that is established as real, which would exist. Have a mode of existence which is objectively established without simply being posited by the force of such an unvitiated cognition. Here, unvitiated cognition refers to a cognition which has not been affected by some kind of temporary source of error, like in terms of the sense faculties, they're affected by drugs or whatnot, or in terms of the mind being the intellect being affected by philosophy or something like that. So this way of appearing of things, that unreal mode of existence of things, is not contradictory if one is simply establishing it as a merely phenomenal thing. But if one is establishing things as being real, and being real here would entail that they would have to exist in the way that they appear at all times and places, not just occasionally, then that is extremely contradictory in that context.
나루랑 오타다 두나야 들루랑 오직도 좋아데 아니 담바 추비 들루라 가그레스 담바 좋아이나 아니 담바 주나 남바 탐제도 좀 빵데 내고고서 뒤다도 아니 담바 연구 나루 되고 연구 그레스 좀 빵데 담바 연구 그레스
좀 빵데 so
남주데 내좀 믿어 봐. 니 요모도 봐.
So thus, the fact that when one investigates things as they appear as if they possessed intrinsic identity, and not just conventionally, but ultimately as if that intrinsic identity was sort of part of them intrinsically, then, and when discovers that it's not the case that they exist that way, then that establishes that they're not real. That is, they don't exist in the way they appear. Because that is because if something is real, it has to appear that way at all times and places. It's not something that could just occur occasionally under certain conditions. Rather, it has to. If it was established as real in that way, then it would have to appear that way to us in our ordinary when it appears to us just ordinarily, as well as subsequent to having investigated the actual sort of existential status of the thing that we're interested in.
Oh yeah, that never true what you know. Ngarshapanasi, Nalula, or Tatatu Naya, Ani Cardosorum, Dulula, Nezu Mizumbate, Miss Nalula, or Tatatu Naya, Dulula, or Chidu, not to the Nezu Mizumbate, Missicures. Demba Yena, Cola, Nandudan, Demba said the conditions of Resana, now the true Matukushana, now the true much. Demba Yena, and then Nandu the Nezu Tingore. Now, the Nezu Tungo, now Lulong, what had to Naya, the Ludong, what keep the trouble the Missicures. Now to the Nezu meeting, but the Missicures. And then by Yena, Chunam Rang, Chashadan, what had to now Lotte, then by Yena, Chuna Rang, Chashanam, what had the Yungores. What had the Yungore? They know what had to now Lotte, and a Mandu Shaw to Grace.
What had you done with Shiva?
What had I what had I Shiva Mantuba
So thus, when we're examining like the relationship between the self and the aggregates, again, returning to the initial point that they appear to us ordinarily as if they, without examination, as if they had a distinct character, as if their character was completely distinct. But under investigation, we can determine that in fact they have the same basic character. And that disparity between the way that they appear to us ordinarily and the way they actually exist demonstrates then that that they're unreal. In that when they are appearing to us without having examined them and determined what their actual character is, that mode of appearance is erroneous. And yet, when we investigate them and determine that in fact they have the same character, that under analysis, then that disparity demonstrates that they don't exist as they appear to us ordinarily. So, la gente llamason, laxon, di tama di laxon.
Canin to consumason. One Shabbat, the Jumate, Nandu, Damba Yina. Then be turned in, none to the Nezu Timbutary, none to the Nezu meeting by Yonsai Maris. They may in the Marishabi Jumate, none to the Nezu meeting, but a miserable Meko Grace. This one. Then by Yina.
Dembaduna?
Or then by Yina. And Castle none to the Nezu Timbajuko, take in the you might now long what had I done now, do long what you do to work, not to the Nezu Museum, but the Missiba to Grace, Melko Grace.
So here then, in the commentary itself says that if something was established as real, then it would have to be such that it exists without it completely devoid of the unreal character in all aspects. And in the case of the way, it would be impossible for it to exist in the way similar to a magical illusion, as we've described previously, in which the way it appears and the way it exists are discordant. There's a difference between them. So here again, this is referring back again to within this system, the way the aggregates and the self and the aggregates, which are
아니 로 만주바 인구래 하고서 로 만주바 두그래 로 만주바 주와당 아니 가서래 최남랑 그 차자남랑 오 타대 연구를 풍부당 아니 가서래 다다 풍부니 어디 아니 오 타대 연구 그래 날 풍부를 전 들어왔다 최남랑 최 강다인다랑 그 차자남랑 오 타대도 해줘 그래
뭐 자시다
오 타대랑 그 차자남랑
다리는 로야 마주 두고
오 타대 나 로데 만주바 그래 오 타대 로 만주바이나 아니 최대다 랑그 차자남랑 오 타대 연구를 오 타대이나 오 지금 연구 그래
뭐 지금 인구 그래 So then here then all with respect to phenomena, then if I'm sorry, I'm really lost here. 저는 랑기 차시던 뭐 타지 랑 willo대야 마주고 두고래.
덴바이나 랑그 차샤남다 오 타대도 나 어디 아니 만주위 쇼도 그래. 만주위 쇼받은 랑그 차샤남다 오 타대 랑그 저는 랑그 차샤남다 오 타대 연구 그래. 코나위로데 만주위 쇼와 연구나. 그와 대단한 오 지금 연구 그래.
So thus, then here it was saying is that if they were not like magical illusions, then the phenomena, when they're with respect to the cognition to which they're appearing, which for that cognition which is erroneous, sees them as having a character which is different from their parts. The phenomena and as the thing which is designated and the underlying base of that, which is the basis of designation, as if they had different characters entirely. That sort of cognition would necessarily be non-erroneous, and that would then also entail that the phenomena and their basis of designation would be not of the same character. And if that was the case, then they would be unrelated.
그래서 오야 다 되네 오 지금 많이 오 타대이나 다 재미 퇴신 전화랑 그 차전다 차선이 어디 재미 퇴신 다다 풍부니 어디 재미 퇴신 그보면 따보나시 아니 재미 퇴신도 좋아해서 아니 내밤 좀 바뀌어래
So if they were unrelated in that way, there would be all kinds of problems that arise. What it would mean would be so that if a thing and its basis of designation, so for example, again, the self and the aggregates had a completely different character, they would thus be unrelated, and they would be sort of like a pot and a pillar. They would have no necessary relationship whatsoever. They would be unrelated things, and that would entail, of course, many different faults that would be unacceptable.
현재 인자다 관절 선고와래서나 덴바 매장 레왕 그 중세 샤바 덴바 매장 레왕 그 중세 샤바 인자 가자 쇼디 간라 레메라 왕기 샤바 마인바 아니 투모 마이비 둘이 중에 추바스야 랑은 추바스야나 레 로네메라 나요 왕기 샤바 마인바 랑은 추바 투모 마인바 둘이 추바디 다 랑지비
So thus, the culmination of all of this is that when one is delineating the object of negation, which here is something existing as real in the way they're defining it, they do that by examining the thing and looking for how it exists, especially in relationship to the cognition which is aware of it, the awareness which is cognizing it. So what they would say then, if something is established as real, it would be such that it would exist by means of its own unique mode of existence, without just a second. Without occurring due to the force of its appearing to a cognition which is not erroneous.
Oh yeah, that so do tanjuwada midrawade karere sana. Ani yumi trushi talando nawade, yumi trushi deshin talando nawade. Ani le wangi xiajiang trushi korangu talando nawa mingawa. Le jone tajun xiwa na xie ge bei xaba na xin. O yumi trushi talando nawade le wangi xiajiang trushi ngone talando nawa mingawa te xindu. 주시 나는 달란도 매나 주시 띵도 달란 나지 니와데 매나 아니다 달란도 나그 말에스 거와 인장 주시 원의 달란도 나와 민가와提醒도 대배라 하자니 최는 레왕기 샤장 안내 랑은 주와 민가와 그래서
So then here then they because of that difference that criterion they establish for something being established as real, that it has its own unique uncommon mode of existence, not that is independent of the force of it being established as such through a cognition which is not compromised by some sort of source of error. Then their interpretation then again of this example of the illusory appearance of an elephant or a horse and so forth is again differs from that of the Prasangika's interpretation of this same example. For them, they would say that if again looking at this example, you have the basis for the illusory appearance, the elephant and horse. There's a stick or some kind of stone or a stick which is used for this conjuring, and in that case, the Swatantrikas would say that although it is the case that the illusion only arises when that act of conjuring has occurred, nevertheless. There's a power within the stone or the stick that the spell is being cast over to actually produce that illusion. So there's some kind of objective character of the thing to be able to produce the cognition which is cognizing it. It's not like it's devoid of any kind of objective ability to be able to produce the cognition that cognizes it.
Oh yeah, that did it. Then I tell you where Ribi Gaja Chamo Cheba, Satan you Ribi Chamo Gaja Chamo Cheba, said Ranjanji Chua Jimba. He take race and I tell you Ribi Gaja Chamo Cheba, that Tanda, Marandola, Nandu Daji Chedi Tamje. Maran now you chedi tam, Nandu Daji Chedi Tamje. Chedin a mena. And it Tanya Ginamja Chasa Meba. Oh, that Nandu Daji Chedi Mashana, and it Tanya Ginamja Chasa Meba, Tanjuwagi Gaja Chamo Chebi is it about Tanju Gaja Chamo Arandola, Nandu Daji, and it Chedi Tamje, Tanju Gaja Che. Oh, Mena, Tanya Jinasha Chameba, Samzambala Sova, Trunda, Oma, Shenji, Doba Tar. Ranjuba Dejan Gones, Ranjuba Dejan Gone, and it's Chetamje, Rangona Yobata, Rangitani Trubata, Rashi Truba, what Tesumbuta, Konak Kelly, Rangaji Truba Mena, Chena Josa Meba, Rashi Modumna, Chena Josa Meba, Magi Samza Benangishani, Samza Manashi Chani Shani, Josa Meba. Yin Yinzu de Carresa, Le Wang Shapa member. Chenamji de Lura Yina Anita, Koranganezu de Carresa, Lola Nayo Wang Shaba, my Chenamji de Lura Yina, Anita Yita Lola, Rani, Tanya Castle, Chashanam, what Tatetu, Minango Grace. Chashanam, what Tatetu, Minango Wala, Tatanagi Ores. Now, when you may be, I know Castle, what Tatetu Jula. Yeah.
괜찮아.
뭐 대대나 무슨 진에 봐요 그쪽으로 아니 다 얘기를 다야.
뭐 다리나.
뭐 대대나 무슨 진에 봐 봐요라.
So thus, that being the case, then here, okay.
리베 가자 참모 체비 탄주외 알아줘라 나줘 얘기 다다라자라 나줘데 리베 가자레스 그래 지체는 체디는 매나 타녀지는 자차사 러브리 가자 체바 오 된다왜 탄주외 가자 체비 알아줘라 나줘지 타녀지 남자 된다 매나 남자 차사 매배 아니 섬자 말아서 좀더 엄마 현지 안에다 나주다지테 랑은에 투어지고 랑주배 텔라관에 랑주배야 전에 랑은에 투바다 랑그 천이지 투바다 라신지 투바제 두고 아래스.
So thus here then there's a difference between the Prasangika and Swatantrika way of doing this in that the Prasangikas would say that the things appearing to us as if they possess some kind of intrinsic identity, they would not accept that even conventionally. Whereas the Swatantrikas would say that it's necessary that there be some kind of objective basis for our cognitions. That is, there has to be something that is establishable, determinable as a foundation for the arising of our perception or cognition of it. So that being the case here, then when the Prasangikas, what they take to be the subtle object of negation, something existing by means of its own intrinsic identity, a subtle object of negation of reasoning, things existing by means of their own intrinsic identity, then within the Swatantrika perspective, that existence by means of intrinsic identity has to have some kind of objective existence. Otherwise, there would be no way to establish any kind of relationships, causality, the functionality of things. All of those conventional presentation of the way things work would not be viable. So here then it says that
라신지 투바제 레스 차로아.
랑신기 주버
라신지 투바제 인양시다. 라신지 투바 레디 인주디 가레레잖아. 너는 나의 왕그 샤바 마인 바그 최랑 그 되루이나 샤바 마인 바지 최랑 그 되루이나 아니 대라 이 대비 로라 랑그 차샤난도 오 타다도 너네 남묘 거레스 와 남묘 거라스 남묘 거와라 대다도 나유로 나원 대다도 나원에 인도 매배
So, therefore, thus the way things appear to us right now, the way they just objects ordinarily appear to us as possessing some kind of intrinsic identity, for the Swatantrikas and all of the other lower schools of philosophy, they would say that if things didn't actually possess that kind of intrinsic identity conventionally, then there would be no way whatsoever to establish, there'd be no basis for establishing all of the conventional presentations of things, causal relationships, all of the other forms of relationships, functionality that are necessary within the conventional sphere of things. And so all of the schools, just like the Chittamatra followers of the mind-only doctrine and so forth, all of the lower schools of philosophy as well, hold that things have to be established by means of their own intrinsic identity, to one extent or another at least. And so likewise, the Swatantrikas here, out of consideration of that, they say that all phenomena exist objectively from their own side. They say that all phenomena are established by means of their own intrinsic identity, that they are established by means of intrinsic existence. They hold all three of those criteria for being able to establish things conventionally. And that being the case, then without things being able to be established by that way through the force of their appearing to unvitiated cognition, then rangi chashi dungo tadi miyang
na minang tadedu minang ko re
nyumetu mepe
an tadedu minang ko wala tatan na wani nyendu me ba rang ge ta chachanem dong wo tadedu na wa de nyendu me ba yinbe wo tadedu chukre da wo tadedu juna ane tela ngosunji ne ba ma bo juba yinjang gongdu xia ba ge wo tade yina ane chada chachen yo de zhe me te xian ro wo na xin zhuo guan de 아니 무슨 짓내 봐만 보시네 다 간데 소고아래 제 탐제 땜바 매바다 전담바 매바다 양다바 마주바 에 마주바다 초진에 랑은의 주바다 라신지 주바다 안에 랑의 천이 주가 두셔야 돼是吧 대신 시야 주바제 인양 순송아 랑의 천이지 주바제 인양 언니 다 가서를 덴바 매바당 무슨 지네 밤 보주바 인자 최던제 덴바 매바당 대한다바 매바당 양다바 마주바 시에
So thus, that way that things do exist, that is, that they are established, they exist from their own side to one degree or another, that they are established by means of their own intrinsic identity to one degree or another, that they do exist such that they're established by intrinsic nature or intrinsic existence. Then, if, however, phenomena possessed a mode of existence, which was not posited through the force of their appearing to a correct or non-compromised cognition, then with regard to that mind, that cognition which is directed towards them in that way, they would necessarily have to appear as having a character which is different from that of their own parts. And if they and since such an appearance of the things existing with a character which is different from their parts, it's undeniable that things do appear that way to us ordinary beings who have not yet cognized emptiness. Therefore, since that's the case, then things would come to possess a different character if they existed in the way they actually appear to us in that way. So that being the case, seeing the Swatantrikas, seeing that there would necessarily be many different problems that would arise as far as the way we directly perceive things. That is, when we perceive a visible form or any other sensible object, it appears as if it has a different character that is a character different from the parts which are its basis of designation. And likewise, that appears as if it was established with, objectively without being just occurring due to the force of the cognition which is cognizing it. And that being the case, then the Swatantrikas say that all phenomena are not real, that they are not ultimately existent, and that they're not established in fact. They have these three different points that they say on the negative side. On the positive side, they say that all phenomena are established by means of their own intrinsic nature. That all phenomena are established by means of their own intrinsic identity, that they're established by intrinsic nature or intrinsic existence, and that they are established objectively from their side. But on the negative side, they say things are not, don't exist as they appear. They're not real in that way, and that they're not ultimately existent, and they're not established in fact.
Oh yeah, that dona, chönam rangungena rangungena majubam, rashiji majubam, rangi chaniji mena. 아니 랑기 차와 탐제 냠바라 고네 랑지바기 아니 체나 탐제 랑기 천이지 봐 랑시지 봐 랑을 주바스면서 셰바체 저 유주 태양 랑은 추바 유주 태가야 태양 레왕기 쇼 메고바기 덴바시 마이레베스나 다테이 말이 덴바시나 양견요 봐 유주 태양 레왕기 쇼 마고바기 덴바시이나 다진 콘도 샤바나시 전에 랑그 차샤남도 오 타다도 나왔다기 안에 들루스 쪼고레스 덴바이나 랑그 차샤도 나왔다기 오 타다도 들루스 쪼나 아니 랑그 차샤도 나왔소지 아니 가소리 오 타다 인고레스我他的没把印象，俺那他看说的对路是马主吧，俺路上我太太那对路上我马主吧，有的是做国外，但把是什么是马主吧写到，就是，
So this way of delineating those three criteria on the negative, on the positive side, that things exist in the way those three, and then likewise on the negative side that they are devoid of that forms of existence in three different ways, is extremely important and special method for leading a person into a very subtle understanding of emptiness. And in brief, it says that here that if the Swatantrikas would say that if phenomena were not established from their own side, then it would be the case, they think, that all of their functionality would disintegrate, that one wouldn't be able to establish relationships between cause and effect, or between actions and results, and so forth. And then, that being the case, then they hold that things do exist by means of their own character, and have their own sort of. They do have a sort of mode of autonomous existence on the conventional level, objective existence, and so forth. And then seeing that I'm sorry. 유추 때가 양 로왕기 쇼크 미그베
쇼메 덴바시이나스 아니 랑그 차샤는도 오 타다도 나왔다 들루고 그래서 오 타다도 주고 그래서 들루스 주고 그래서 유전티 아니 다 가서래 덴바서 순수 매봐 덴바 양다바 주바 된다바 주바면
So that's, on the other hand, if the Swatantrikas would say that things do have a degree of autonomous existence, but if that didn't require that being established through the force of some correct, valid kind of cognition, then things would be real. That is, they would exist as they appear, and that can't be the case because, or I'm saying here that if they would have to exist such that they would, in the way that they appear, as having a character which is different from that of their parts. And then they would have to have a kind of existence which is unique to them, independent of their appearing to a cognition. Unvitiated cognition, and that being the case, then they posit these three standards of that things are not real, that they're not ultimately existent, that they're not established in fact.
Tena di le shabi zumba chulu ni lo ranga wala tata chaba tsam inji serega rangi bi luji zumba chunjo bi ane lo ranga wagi nanzuda nezu midumba toba tsamla ane zumba chaba as rwa ane uma wande bi zumba ta tuemeji uma tanju wagi ane zumba chulu de nanzuda nezu midumba ane demba ngundu kikoku wari zumba ta tuemeji bes rwa ane 타라니지 가자 참모 탄주바게 가자 참모데 덴줄라치 란지벌리지 가자 참모데 덴줄라 체나양 덴주피샤와게 측잠라 자나양 롱올라 민다바 첨부용에 그러와 다 탄주베 가자 수이가라 르베 가서를 르 민게파 샤바자 마이바 라완도 주바 자와네 메바체 그러와 민게파 따바잠 그러와 민게 파 샤바점 다 란주변에기 민게 따바점장 르 샤바점 캐레나양 민게 파르 따바점장 르 파르 샤바점 마인바 파리샤바세가 유정원의 중세장 매바지 고고요래. 뭐 니장 단주비 타란이지 가자 참모 된줄라 셔바 특담 자양 농업 민저바 첨부 원야의 거래를 했으나 안다 로 가자 쳐줄라 민저바 차라 첨부 연구하래.
So that being the case, here then, the way in this system, the Prasangika system, the way in which they establish that things are unreal through explaining how they're established by thought or by cognition, is quite different from the way in which it is done within the Swatantrika system. The Swatantrika system would say that yes, that things possess a kind of motive, their own unique mode of existence, but that's not independent of the way that they are determined and established through by the force of thought. It doesn't have autonomy. Things don't have autonomy independent of the way in which they're established by thought. The Prasangikas, on the other hand, would say that no, that kind of autonomy that the Swatantrikas are positing is in fact not viable. That things are merely established by thought and language. They're not. There's not some kind of objective foundation for their identity, for their determination. And so, even though the two schools use the same terminology as far as saying that things are not real, in fact, there's a huge difference between, or a substantial difference between the way the Prasangikas posit things as being unreal and the way in which the Swatantrikas posit things as being unreal. Here now, la kendi lo ranga wala deta drakpat sam yingi deta löshak dena ti löshakpa zumpe drublukni
dena löshakpa zumpe drublukni lo ranga wala deta drakpat sam yingi lo ranga wala andu danya zummatumba
lo ranga wala deta drakpat sam yingi
drakpat sam yingi lo ranga wina andu danya zummatumba toba samla Jimmy Dishin Talando Naya, Talando Matruata. Luranga, we now do the Nedu Mutumba to Tubatamla. Jimba Tramutu Mogache, Debaki Mogache.
So now, here then the text is literally saying that then with respect to the way in which things are posited by thought, by cognition, here, and the way in which they're established as being unreal, this is done simply as it's commonly accepted among ordinary people's way of thinking about things. So ordinary people, when they see an illusory elephant or an illusory horse, they're able to say without special analysis, once they understand that it's illusory, they can see that it's illusory. They know it's illusory. But here then, when one's talking about the way in which the Madhyamaka schools are positing something being real or illusory, it's not the same as that. They're investigating the basic nature of the way things appear, even existing things like selves and the aggregates that are the basis of designation of the self. Those things actually exist, as opposed to illusory horses and elephants, which are not real horses and elephants. So here then, there's quite different. There's a very subtle and important difference in the delineation, the definition of the object of negation by the Prasangika and Swatantrika schools. And that although they use the same words, that something is not real, or something is unreal, there's a huge difference between them, because in the way in which that delineation of the object of negation appears to the mind. This.
아기 진예 사비게 와지 된다 도와 그나 감변다 잡아 알레덴비니 모든 루사지
사지 포기
이조심에도 장화리라고
랍링진이 대개바디 성계싱둠
미리에 보와예
조건엄 닥싱어주 버쇼 이동 구루라나만다와 감미아타야미 데니